Hello, and welcome to this classical guitar video. I'm Frederick Hand. Today we're going to be looking at some of the various fundamental techniques in classical guitar playing with the goal of revealing your own natural technique, your own natural dexterity and facility. And since the ultimate goal is not to play the guitar but to play music, it's very important that whatever we learn, it be known on a physical level. The muscles have a memory of their own, and the way in which they learn is by constant repetition. So it's extremely important that we repeat these various motions and that we do it with our full attention. The most important thing is to be comfortable and to be relaxed. So let's begin with sitting. And to start off with, you might just put the guitar down and just sit straight on the edge of the chair, allowing your back to be straight, and just close your eyes and really relax. Experience what it feels like to be relaxed. So often when we play the guitar, as soon as we pick it up, we're already tense. So learn what this feels like. Now you can pick up the guitar. We're going to bring our left leg up. Here it's on a footstool. There are other devices that we can use to elevate the guitar. One is this cushion, and this allows the feet to remain on the floor, which is actually better for you. If you're going to be playing long hours, it puts less stress on the lower back. In addition to the cushion, there are other devices on the market, some attached to the guitar. And if you're at all dealing with the issue of position right now, I would urge you to investigate these other devices because it's very helpful to be extremely comfortable, and over a period of hours of practicing, the wear and tear on the body gets very great. So look into these alternative ways of holding. I'm comfortable with the footstool, so I'm going to continue to use that. Now the reason that we elevate the left leg is because without it, we'd be reaching down for the guitar, hunched over. The guitar would be tilted downward, so the sound would be going down. By elevating it, keep the guitar slightly tilted. It can be, there's a variety of ways to do it, and you have to, that goes along with just being comfortable, but basically we want the sound to go out this way. So you're sitting up, and the right arm goes over the guitar and holds the guitar without pressing in. Just the weight of the arm holds the guitar. Your left hand is free to move and play, and so is your right hand. The arm actually can move this way, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. So hopefully we're still comfortable. You can check to see that your shoulders are still level. And in terms of playing position with the right hand, we'll just bring it up to the guitar like that. And in doing so, make sure that no tension has creeped in. Let's begin with the right hand. Before we can actually deal with the playing positions, we need to talk about fingernails. It's extremely important that our nails have the proper shape so that we can play with a good tone. And the way to look at your nails would be straight on like this, so that you can see the shape of the nail. There are many ways to do this, but one that works for a lot of people is to just simply follow the contour of the fingers. The thumb is a separate matter, and we'll talk about that later. But for the I, M, and A fingers, you want this roundness. It's good to use a high-quality nail file, and you can get this at any drugstore. And when you file the nail, you want to file slightly at an angle, so you're kind of beveling the edge of the nail, like that. Now when you file the nail, that's going to rip up the nail just a little bit, even with a good nail file. And you want to use something to polish the nail afterwards. I like to use a number 500 sandpaper. If you go to the drugstore, you'll see that in the nail care section there are many products. The important thing is to not leave any rough edges, so that when the nail makes contact with the string, it's totally smooth, like you were polishing a diamond. We're ready to start with the right hand position. So with your arm just dangling, come up to the guitar and place your I finger on the third string, M on the second string, and A finger on the third string. And the fingers are going to be staying together. You don't have to grip, but we don't want to see this kind of position. The idea again is that when your hand naturally hangs down, the fingers are fairly close together, and it takes muscles to hold them out like this. So we want to be relaxed, just bring them up to this position, and we're going to have a roundness in the finger as opposed to straight. We don't want to be too far over like this. Slight arch. We'll talk more about that later. If we get too much arch, we're going to be stretching skin and tendons over the bone, and that's not going to be comfortable. If we get too flat a wrist, we're not going to be able to pluck with the right stroke. We're going to have to pluck up, which we don't want to do. So again, be very comfortable and experiment. You might find putting the arm here, depending on how long your arm is, might be better. For shorter people, they're going to come over more at this angle. Keep that shoulder low, that's a key. Now, one very important angle is a V that's formed with the thumb. The reason for that V is that as we follow through, if our thumb is right over the I finger, they meet and there's not room to follow through. So we need to plant the hand in such a way where the finger can freely move. It's going to touch the thumb when you pluck with the I, but after the stroke, and the same thing holds true for the thumb. Might be good at this point to tune up. So here's the E string. The B string. That's G. Here's D. And the low E. We want our hand to come over the guitar in such a way that we're about halfway over the sound hole. Our I finger would be over the hole, maybe our M finger right around here at the edge of the hole, and the A finger off the hole. This differs from guitar to guitar, but that's a good basic place to start. Sometimes our arm comes over the guitar comfortably somewhere else, but you're going to have to adjust and become comfortable with it here because this is more of a darker, muted sound, and this is more the norm. And as we move the hand, we go towards the bridge, we get ponticello. So let's consider this our basic position. From a set position, allow the first finger to just move and come back. The return is very important. As we pull the finger in, we're contracting a muscle. And so the quicker we return, the quicker we relax that muscle. The other important thing is that we want to return immediately to playing position. So just try that stroke a few times and allow some space in between the strokes. Then try the M finger. And the A finger. Notice that the hand stays steady. It's the fingers that move, so we shouldn't see this kind of motion. It's a hinge effect. Whether we're using one finger or we can use all the fingers. A good way to do this is to start off the guitar. Notice the short follow through, and then go closer in on the strings and eventually to the strings. After you've practiced a few times with these strokes with a set position, that is with the fingers resting on the strings, Try it from above. Now this is the basic stroke, and even though it may seem very elementary, it's surprising how many advanced players have some difficulty with this stroke. As we proceed on, we'll see how essential it is for the basic stroke to be in this manner. As we add more motion to a stroke, we lose the efficiency of the stroke and also the relaxation. For right now, make sure that the pressure that you're using on the strings is very light, very easy, no effort whatsoever. It should never be a struggle. Now the pinky sometimes has a tendency to kind of spasm out like that. And if you have that problem, just tuck it in and make it move with the A finger. At first that might feel awkward, but eventually it'll just do it on its own. So let's put our I, M, and A fingers on the first, second, and third strings. And notice that the follow-through that I'm using is extremely small. There are some teachers that teach a large follow-through, contracting all the way back. And they talk about this in terms of promoting independence of motion. The problem with this exaggeration is that if we keep repeating it, the muscles learn to do that. And what we need is to keep repeating over and over what we're actually going to do. So I would discourage you from a large motion, which both keeps the hand contracted and also takes a long time to get back to playing position. You can get just as much volume from a short stroke. And volume is not something we should be concerned with right now. So let's put our I, M, and A back and talk about the thumb. You can think of the thumb as being the bass player. And for the free stroke, what we want to have is a semicircle. In case I didn't mention it, what we've been doing is the free stroke. If we simply stroke down, we're not ready to play again. So the semicircle is a way of coming back to playing position. If we come back in the same way that we went down, we're going to bump against the string. So just slightly avoid it. And incidentally, the same thing holds true for I, M, and A. Obviously, we don't return like that, or we'll pluck the string on the downward stroke, but we just simply avoid it. It's not a big motion. Now we're ready to play P, I, M, and A together. Notice that they move in contrary motion and return to playing position in contrary motion. You can try them on different strings. Again, see how small that motion actually is. Now a word about the position of the thumb. Some people play with the thumb above the string itself. In fact, more than most do it that way. And some are more comfortable with the thumb coming from down below, as Segovia did. Neither one is wrong or right. It's whatever is comfortable to you. So now let's try our free stroke out on an excerpt of a source study in C major, so that you see how it works in a piece. So we talked about this natural dexterity that we have. Most people are able to simply move the fingers like this without any trouble. And the question is, how do we bring that to the guitar? How do we bring that into play? So let's go back to our set position, and we're going to discuss arpeggios. Now we could play arpeggios very slowly. in time we could work up to speed. But you know, we already have this motion. Let's just actually set the thumb and just start with the I, M, and A fingers. And if we slightly separate that, we've got a very fast arpeggio right away. That's your natural dexterity. It's already there. So I would suggest, since it's imperative that this motion be carried over into this motion, that it doesn't change, that you practice this exercise. Pluck together, separate, together, and then separate. And allow enough space in between so that you can actually experience what these things feel like. So often people practice like this, and they're really not experiencing the physical sensation of it. So take your time. And once that's comfortable, you can add the thumb. You can move around from string to string. The arpeggiated version should feel no different than plucking this way in terms of the movement. There is a slight difference in the sensation. Now, when you're comfortable with that, you're ready to move on to the reverse. The reverse is often more problematic for people, but the same principles apply. You can first start from a set position if that's easiest. And then from above. And you can move from string to string. Often there is a tendency in the reverse to pull up with these fingers. This motion is a definite no-no in classical guitar playing. We're contracting the hand in a way which is inefficient, and it also produces a rather harsh sound. That's where that sound comes from. So there's no pulling up. It's always this hinge motion that we talked about before. Now, for some people, that's as far as one should go in terms of practicing that with this video. We're going to go on, but the important thing is before you go on, you really internalize these movements. They're known at the physical level. If you try and do too much too soon, then you just get frustrated. Remember, the key is no effort, no strain. So in terms of going on, we want to combine these two arpeggios to get this. Now, sometimes it's difficult to bring these two arpeggios together, the ascending and descending arpeggios. And there's a way to do that which can almost trick the hand into performing this feat. You can either start with a 3-note arpeggio with the A finger planted on the E string, and then up and down. Then bring the two arpeggios closer together. Again, this feeling can be elusive and it takes patience. But playing this way, as opposed to this way, is going to make you a more efficient guitar player. Now, another way we can do this is to reverse it. We'll have a 4-note arpeggio and then a 3. And then bring those closer together. If there's difficulty, it could be a nail catching. It could be the angle needs to be slightly more this way or slightly more that way. One thing I haven't talked about is the angle in which the fingers meet the string. If we come straight on, you'll produce this type of tone. Kind of thin and picky. If we turn slightly to the left, we get a little bit of a warmer sound. And that's the sound we're trying to produce. So the right hand should be slightly tilted in this way. Now when you do these arpeggios, see if there's an evenness of volume, so we don't have or any particular note accented. Also see if there's an evenness in the ripple of the notes themselves, the spaces between the notes. Is it? It should be nice and even. And that will happen when you're totally relaxed. If you're comfortable with this arpeggio, you might just experiment with and just play with it. It's a very pleasant sensation, sort of like a cat kneading. Enjoy the experience of that kind of freedom. And if there's difficulty with this, go back to this. That's our master position. And from that, all the other free strokes happen. And here's how that arpeggio might sound in the context of a piece. Now you may have noticed that I used a different kind of stroke some of the time. That's a rest stroke, and this next piece that I'm going to play uses quite a bit of rest stroke. It's called a Celtic tale. There are different approaches to the rest stroke. Essentially, we want to get the hand in the same position or very similar position than the free stroke. The only difference is we're going to come straight through and rest on the adjacent string. So this is free stroke, rest stroke. The thumb comes straight down. You could actually have the image of it falling on the string. In fact, that's not a bad image to have for all the fingers, rather than pushing or smacking the string. Just allow the finger to fall on the string. That uses the least amount of effort. Now, again, we want to make sure that we're on the left side of the nail, as opposed to and some people prefer to be slightly above on this stroke, and that helps in terms of playing a faster rest stroke. However, if we want to get more volume, if we allow that first digit to push in, that produces more sound without using force. It's the push in which drives the string into the back of the guitar and makes the face vibrate more. And this kind of stroke is used when you have lots of time, for instance, in the piece you just heard. You can get a very warm, fat sound that way. However, if you need to play quickly, then you need to come from slightly higher so that, because there isn't time for that digit to collapse like that. Good example would be the Bach Third Cello Suite Prelude. Now notice when I played that excerpt that I might have moved my arm a little bit. In general, we don't use the arm in that way to play the stroke. But sometimes when we get, you might say, rambunctious, we can occasionally do excessive motions. The whole point of practicing these strokes is to eliminate wasted motion. In fact, the definition of a good technique is the elimination of wasted motion. But occasionally, if you want to bring out something, you might use a little more arm. For speed, definitely don't use the arm. The larger muscles you use, the longer it takes to get the whole stroke in motion. So let's review these strokes in the context of the piece you just heard, Celtic Tale. We start off with rest stroke. Now one thing you'll notice is that for the most part I'm alternating my fingers. This is not so essential in a slow piece because we have lots of time. We generally think of the rule of alternation is that you always alternate. There's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes you get a better sound out of one finger than the other, and you tend to favor that nail. So long as the piece is going slowly enough, that's okay to repeat a finger. Generally, try not to. The rule is not there to put you in a straitjacket. It's there to help you. As soon as the tempo of the piece picks up, or the space of the notes gets closer, you're going to need to be able to alternate as opposed to playing with one finger. You simply can't do it as quickly. Now, you generally want to cross over strings. Since we have our hands slightly tilted this way, it's a little easier to do it M-I as opposed to going I-M. That's kind of clumsy. So whenever possible, finger pieces in that way. When you practice scales, you're going to wind up having to cross over with both I-M and M-I, and both are essential. But if you have a choice, certainly going descending, you want to go M-I, and ascending, you want to go I-M. Let's take when the melody becomes harmonized. Now this is much more free stroke. I can play some rest strokes, but it's much more difficult. So as soon as you're adding chords, harmonies to the melody, we would probably use more free strokes. Rest stroke on the melody when we can. here's our little arpeggio. Notice sometimes I'm using my thumb in a sweeping motion. Using the thumb this way produces a very full sound on the guitar, especially if I get to the side and slice the strings. Well, we haven't discussed playing harmonics, but we might take a moment. You take the I finger, and in this case it's a natural harmonic, and place it on the open string, and with either the M or the A finger you pluck. If you want to get artificial harmonics by fretting the notes, then we just have to move up on the fingerboard. Whenever I can, I'm using my rest stroke to bring out the melody. Let's talk about the left hand now. Let's bring the arm up. Now the first thing is that we want to play right on the fingertip itself. So the finger has to be rounded. And with the left hand there are a lot of angles to consider. For instance, let's place our fingers right on the fingertips and let's take it on the third string. The first angle would be this one to consider. When we straighten out our fingers, they should be roughly parallel to the frets themselves. So we don't want to see this kind of position, nor this position. Of course, there are always exceptions, and depending on the demands of the music, sometimes we have to contort our hands into these various shapes. But this is the norm, and one should strive for this. The other angle has to do with the angle that this digit meets the guitar itself. It should be primarily at a right angle, as opposed to being flat like that, or overextended like this. As we roll over, we put a lot of tension on the wrist. If we come too flat, we can't get as clean a stop with as least effort. So we want to make sure that we're right on the fingertip. And if you press down on the strings hard and you look at your fingers, you'll see that the string should go right through the center of the pad of the finger. Now, one of the most common mistakes in playing the guitar is to grip too hard. It's not that necessary to use that much pressure. And a good exercise is to start with the finger just touching the string, and then gently pushing down and finding out exactly how much pressure it takes to produce a clean stop. You'll be surprised to see how little it actually takes. We usually spend so much energy gripping the guitar. So we were talking about these angles. Another angle that is important is the angle of the thumb. So we don't want the thumb to be in this position. We want it to support the fingers in this fashion, roughly between the first and second finger. Some people are a little more comfortable with it one way or the other. But you want to avoid stretching the thumb all the way out, let's say to the third finger. That puts a lot of tension and pressure on this part of the hand. It's not going to feel good for any length of time. When you're playing on the first string, you want your thumb to be down low behind the first finger. As we move up on the guitar, we inch our thumb up. You don't have to do it every string. Sometimes every 2 strings is enough. But by the time we get to the 6th string, we have our finger behind, our thumb that is, behind the fingers, supporting them. So we avoid this kind of movement, or this, which is popular in jazz and pop guitar. With classical guitar, we stay in this position and move like this. The elbow is very important. As we shift the elbow in, it affects the angle of the left hand. And if we bring it out, that also affects the angle. We want to stay with this right angle position, whether we're up here or down in the first position. And the arm and the elbow will determine that. So if we come too far this way, in addition to putting ourselves out of position, we put a lot of tension on the shoulder. If we come too far in, then it's very hard to stretch out and stop the notes cleanly. So here's an exercise that we can do, which can be helpful in learning this. Let's start on the 5th fret. And go very slowly, always on the fingertip, and also play on the outside of the fret, meaning this side of the fret. If we come in, it's much harder to stop the string cleanly. As we go to the outside of the fret, we can use less pressure. And you want to practice this exercise very slowly. There's no value in playing this fast. Hold your fingers down until you need them for the next note. Most people have a tendency to play with the 4th finger flat, and that's not good. We want to get up on the fingertip. So another advantage of practicing slowly is to give yourself the time to see that you're doing it correctly. Now you should be having your thumb moving up to support the fingers. Now we're ready to shift. And when we shift, we move the whole hand. We don't want to see the fingers get bunched together or leaving the thumb behind. So we've just done that, and we move the whole hand. And you can continue the exercise downward. Whoops, hold down. Then you would shift upward and continue on. Now if you're totally comfortable playing with the in the 5th position, then you can start the exercise down in the 1st position. There's a little more stretch involved, and that will be good. But you never want to strain. So if that's not comfortable, then start in the 5th fret. This next piece was written for my wife, Leslie. It's called Leslie's Song. Let's talk a minute about bar chords. Now, this is something that a lot of people have trouble with. There's a tendency to roll the hand over because we feel this bone and we feel we can get a really good stop there. But what that does is it pulls our hand out of position for the rest of the fingers. So the way to play a bar chord is to press straight down, not tilt it over. Very often you see people kind of trying to help out with the other fingers. But there again, we're locked and we can't move out. So one finger straight. Sometimes there's an indentation that can make it sound something like this. Now, no matter how hard you press, you probably still get a bit of that. In any case, you don't want to solve that problem by pressing hard. If you move slightly above the indentation or below it, you can usually work around that problem. The main thing, again, is not to grip too hard. As it is, we use a lot of pressure to hold down 6 strings. So experiment with as little pressure as possible. Here again. Find out exactly how much you need and learn what that feels like to avoid over-gripping. You might practice the excerpt from Leslie's song. By playing flat like this, our fingers can still stay in the rounded position that we spoke about before. When we play an abbreviated bar chord, either 3 notes, or 4 notes, or 2 notes, sometimes because of other notes that we have to play, our finger winds up in this position, and that's okay. Try and keep it as straight as you can, but don't worry too much if it veers off a little bit. The demands of different pieces will require your hands to fall into different positions. Now, vibrato is a technique which is often neglected in classical guitar playing, and it exploits a very beautiful aspect of the sonority of the guitar. So we need for our hand and our wrist and our arm to be very loose. If we're gripping hard, it's very hard to move and grip at the same time. And incidentally, as far as shifting goes, that kind of movement, if we're gripping as we're shifting, we're fighting the shift. So we want to release the pressure and allow our fingers to move, unless we're trying to achieve a portamento, glissando. Obviously there we have to keep the pressure down. But often we grip and we don't mean to, especially when we're doing bar chords. So we don't want that. Now at this point you shift and allow the finger to come up a little bit. Otherwise, it's a struggle, and we're trying to eliminate that kind of struggle. So back to the vibrato. Very loose arm, side-to-side motion, and there are different speeds of vibrato. One should experiment with that. Sometimes we want a quicker vibrato. The key is to be very loose in the arm and in the shoulder. The next thing would be slurs, both ascending and descending. Now here's where playing on the fingertips really is essential. Not that it isn't essential in anything else, but you'll pay the penalty for it here. If you're flat in the finger, this is the fleshy part of the finger, you'll get less stop. You could take that warm-up exercise that we did at the a little bit earlier and just do the same thing. Re-attack the string at first and do an ascending slur. You could also do you don't have to hold the fingers down for this exercise because we need a certain amount of height in order to get what folk guitarists call hammer-on. It's very much like hammering a nail. if we try and hammer the nail too close in, we don't get any leverage. And if we come too far back, our accuracy is affected. So you have to experiment, find that amount of height where you feel the fingers swinging freely, but you're still able to play accurately. Descending slurs, we need a pluck with the left hand. Too often guitarists try and get the descending slur by simply lifting up. When you pluck downward, you really get a defined sound. So work on that. Trills are really examples of both ascending and descending slurs. So let's take a simple first finger, second finger trill. Again, the usual mistake is to just lift up and not really get that pluck on the descending slur, so that gets you this kind of sound. You hear it's a lot weaker than. So work on both the height, do it slowly, and the pull down. Now when you're playing on an inside string, you still pull down. You can use your left hand to sort of dampen the string below it, so you don't have to worry about touching it. Even though we normally think of trills as a left-hand technique, cross-string trills have become extremely popular. They're louder and a bit clearer or more articulated than a left-hand trill. So let's see how that works. The technique here is something similar to a tremolo. But we tuck the M finger in so that it goes across. Now don't try and do this fast right away. It's important to be patient, and however long it takes, just get used to that. This is an unorthodox technique in terms of what the fingers are normally called upon to do. It's that M finger reaching down to the second string, or the lower string, however the case may be. So give it time. In the case of heart song, I've used it as a type of arpeggio, cross between an arpeggio and a tremolo. So we talked about this natural facility that we have, and the trick is to translate that into playing the guitar. We know very often, as soon as we pick the guitar up, we lose some of that facility that we quite naturally have. So we saw that in playing free strokes, the simple gripping action was all it took to play rather quick arpeggios. And now what we need to find in terms of playing rest stroke and free stroke on a single string is that same facility. Here's where you have to really let your imagination run free and forget about how you're supposed to hold the guitar, anything like that, or what you think is right and what you think is wrong. And just see if you can allow your fingers to move very freely, as fast as you can. You might take a flat surface. I'm only using this prop because I don't want to scratch up the face of my guitar. But some way, since striking the string isn't the same thing as striking something like this, but it's close to it. You want to find that natural facility and experiment with position. Just tilting the guitar slightly can make an enormous difference in the way it feels. So these kinds of experiments leads you to discover your facility. And you can start by taking, let's say, a little speed burst rather than trying to take a whole scale. Let's say we wanted to play, and we wanted to play it quickly. Again, have that image of the fingers falling on the strings, as opposed to striking the string with a big stroke, just falling. So that's the first part of that little scale. And then add the left hand to it. It's very important to stay loose. Remember, if you're pressing hard with the left hand, that's going to require your right hand to dig in too. They kind of work together. So make sure you're playing with a minimum amount of pressure. So that would be. You take these short little bursts and find your own, make them up. Just find a way for the fingers to move very freely. It should be very pleasurable and very enjoyable. I used to spend hours just playing around with this kind of thing. This is something where you can't really be taught this. You have to discover this for yourself. The key, again, is to be very, very relaxed, very loose, use very little pressure, and experiment. If you have a set idea about how it's supposed to be, that's going to interfere with finding this very personal relationship that you need to have with the instrument. This next piece is an up-tempo tune by Gaspar Sanz. I was never quite sure of the exact translation of the title, but it was something like two clarinet players on horseback. I'd like to discuss practicing and problem solving a little bit. When we start out learning a piece, there's a desire to learn the piece and to hear yourself playing the piece. And we usually have a tempo in mind. It's usually the tempo that we heard Julian Bream or John Williams playing. And the problem is that we try and get to that tempo too quickly. The muscles have their own rate of learning, and it's very different from what you would like it to be. The fact is we don't really know what that rate should be, so we can't impose an artificial rate on it. For instance, let's take this dance by Gaspar Sanz. The best way to approach it would be to go through the piece, finger all the left-hand fingerings, and get familiar with it. Then, instead of trying to learn the whole piece, just take a small bit of it, the very beginning. Decide, do we want rest stroke? Do we want free stroke? Are we returning on the free stroke? Or do we wind up with a closed hand? Are we repeating fingers, as I told you not to do, but just demonstrated? Or are we alternating? We have to just simply be aware of what we're doing and then repeat that over and over and be happy to let the fingers learn at their own rate. This also affects memorization. Memorization really takes place at the physical level. So take small bits of the music and just play it over and over. Also, you don't have to postpone your musicality until later on, so you know the whole piece. Get into playing a little bit of the piece. Play it with feeling. Experiment with the amount of pressure that you put on the strings in terms of volume. There are many different ways we can practice. Basically, it has to do with what we put our attention on. So one way we can practice is to just keep our attention solely on the left hand. Practice slowly and check your position. Are you playing on your fingertips? Are you always playing with the same fingers? How are your slurs? Are you pulling down? You can also practice it with your attention completely on your right hand. How is the follow-through? Is it too long? The pressure that you're putting on the strings? Is your hand relaxed or tense? Are you alternating? Are you using rest stroke in combination with free stroke? For instance, if you have a scale-like passage, it wouldn't sound good to go to incorporate a rest stroke without you intentionally wanting it there. So there are so many ways one could practice a piece. You should practice it very slow, very methodically. When you finger a piece, you should also try out passages quickly to make sure that the fingering that you're using is going to work in a quick passage. The most important way to, in the end, to practice, which people seem to forget about, is to forget everything and just play the music. Really feel the music. If the music is melancholy, for instance in John Dowland's Melancholy Galliard, melancholy. You want to experience melancholia. If the piece is happy, you have to really allow yourself to connect with those sentiments. And, you know, we've been talking about all these technical matters, but in the end, when it comes to actually playing the piece, you really need to forget about all of that and just play. Let's take Leslie's song and go through it. I'll play and comment on some of the techniques that we've discussed in this video. Position. See that your fingers are on this kind of the position we talked about where if you straighten them out they would be parallel to the frets. Make sure that when you pluck the slur that you pluck it with the left hand down and up. You come up, you return. And then you get a good clean pluck. Now, when we go to the melody, it would be good to use rest stroke to bring it out. And notice here, if I use a rest stroke here, I'm unable to use it here, or I'll stop that D string from ringing, and I like it to ring. So we can either use a light rest stroke and a free stroke. The important thing is to match the sound, or just use 2 free strokes. Check your return. Make sure that when you're plucking, you're returning. The return doesn't have to be shot out. No force. Just allow it to return naturally. And here's our arpeggio that we did earlier. That was a thumb rest stroke to bring out the bass line. Combine the rest stroke and a free stroke. You don't have to do this at first. It might be easy to just do 2 free strokes with the right hand. But if you'd like to bring out that top note, you can do it that way. Now with the thumb, I'm going to slice that string, get on the side of the nail, and get a nice rich bass. I'm using as much rest stroke as I can on the melody to make it warm and rich. Make sure that you're alternating. And if you're not alternating, know that you're not alternating. Rest stroke. Again, to bring out the bass. There's another double rest stroke. The bar chord, make sure that you're nice and straight. Use some vibrato to warm it up. Talk too much about rolling chords, but we can roll chords this way, or we can use the thumb. The important thing is not to pull yourself too far out of position with that roll. Let's take that for a minute. That's a bit of a difficult, it's a nasty shift. So we want to release the pressure and just practice that a few times. Have to finesse a move like that. Okay, so that's another tough one. This is great. I get to play, and each time I make a mistake, I cover it up by talking about it. Are nice and loose. See, as you tighten up the right hand, you're going to get tension in the sound itself. I'm using a facial expression to demonstrate that. Get a nice arch in the left hand so that when you have a string ringing underneath the fretted note, it's allowed to ring and not block it off. It's a straight bar. Let's make sure we've got our thumb up where we need it to support the fingers. But move it around when you have to, like here. Now, even though we want to keep the shoulders level in a chord like that, which involves a big stretch, we do have to lean down. That's okay, as long as you then come back up. So you don't stay hunched over too long. Even on a bar chord, we can use some vibrato. Generally, we want to keep the fingers round as much as we can. Every now and then, because of a difficult chord, we have to sort of bend at that knuckle. We want to avoid that, but sometimes we can't. It's okay when the music calls for it. See, some of these chords have difficult shifts. Find that chord difficult, you might practice it in an upper position where the frets are closer together. To make a separate exercise out of it, when we were talking about practicing before, we need to pinpoint the difficult parts of a piece and extract those parts and make exercises that you'll not only be practicing the spot in the piece that's difficult, but you're working on the particular technical problem in a general way, so that you can use it in other pieces that have the same issue. I don't know where I am in the piece, so I'm going to keep playing while you're there. Lots of space in playing. Really appreciate the space between the chords. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank John Gilbert for his beautiful guitar and Jim D'Addario for his strings. And to thank you, number one, for buying this video. I hope it's proved helpful to you. I'd like you to remember that, again, the ultimate goal is not to play the guitar, but to play music. And so don't get stuck at the level of the guitar. Practice these things carefully and practice them slowly. And then when you're practicing the music, at some point, let it go and really connect to the music. That's what it's all about. So thank you again, and good luck with your studies.